Hello and welcome to episode 4 of our Kyosho Inferno NEO ST 3.0 series from RC Empire, and welcome to the break-in video. Now in the last episode we saw the electronics come to life for the first time, and we are now ready to fire up this engine, break it in, tune it up and see it running for the very first time to see what it has. So let's get straight into it. First of all, what we're going to do is fit this little break-in plug. Now this will fit over the carburetor hole and limit the amount of air that gets into the engine, meaning you will always have a super rich air to fuel mixture going into the engine. This is the first time we've used one of these, and if you are a pro you probably don't need to use it, but if you have a heavy trigger finger it will help keep you away from the high revs and keep the engine at low RPMs and running very cool to begin with. And at the same time we can fit our air filter. Now Kyosho in the manual recommend running 5 tanks for braking, and that's exactly what we're going to do, and throw in a few extra ones on top. So we will have the truck up off its wheels for around 3 to 4 tanks and just leave that to idle by itself with 0 throttle. And then for another 3 tanks or so we'll take it super slow with the braking plug still in, just taking our time slowly running the truck up and down a smooth flat road. So let's get started. Turn your transmitter on and check all the electronics are working. And with that done, we can start fueling up with our new Optifuel Race mix. And again, we will do a comparison with this and the standard stuff on another day to show you the difference. But get your filler. Suck up some fuel, and we do not get on with these bottles at all. The amount of fuel we've wasted by squirting it out all over the place and all in the back of the car, there's definitely a technique to it. And you can see there we have 250 milliliters. Pour it in. And we are left with 125 milliliters. So we have a 125 milliliter tank, and this should give us pretty good long run times. Now we're going to do exactly what the manual told us. Prime the engine by putting your finger over the carburetor hole or the exhaust as we're doing now, and pull on the cord 2 to 3 times as it says. Here are your tools also that you get with the car. So get the truck up off its wheels, preferably on a better, more stable surface than a log. Stick your glow igniter in and give it a good short sharp pull. Now the engines at this point will be really tight, so make sure you're at an angle to give you the best possible pull of the cord, unlike us here around the cab. Now we have found that even with the Neo buggy, it needs a little bit of throttle to get going, just a tiny bit, but once it's going you can drop that throttle right back down to neutral straight away. And there you see, and there it wants to go, and there we go. We also found that we had to adjust the idle ever so slightly to open it up. Just a tenth of a turn, if that, because the engine was cutting out when we applied the brakes and was closing the carburetor gap too much. But this was after we let it idle for 3.5 tanks. And that's it. At this point we're going to let it run at idle for 3 tanks and make sure the fuel never runs out between these tanks, because if it runs out the RPMs will rapidly rise and you'll get less fuel and less oil lubricating the engine. Also at idle, at around half a tank in, we were getting around 80 degrees, and on our third tank that was around 90 to 100 degrees. Which is okay, especially considering there's no airflow around the cooling head to help cool it down. But with the first 3.5 tanks through it at idle, it's about time to start running it on the ground at very gentle throttle. So fire it up, still leaving the braking plug in there, and go for it. Just drive it super slow, you don't need to touch any of the tuning needles yet. As always, as the engine breaks in, it will just get better and better and more responsive, more lively and more torquey. So just go backwards and forwards slowly at no more than around quarter throttle. One thing I did notice was that you couldn't go any faster or gain higher RPMs after you passed half throttle on the transmitter. This is because the braking plug was physically limiting the amount of air that could get into the carburetor. So no matter how much you pulled the trigger, it wouldn't go any faster, which is really clever, especially for beginners. And as you can see, the engine with the wind now cooling it is staying really cool at around 40 degrees Celsius. And a good idea is throughout braking to always inspect the car, the gears, the screws, the drive shafts, just to make sure everything is binding and rotating correctly and all the screws are still tight. Then, after around 6 or so tanks, you can remove the braking plug and start getting some higher RPMs. It kept on cutting out when we applied brake, so I upped the idle just a touch upping the carburetor gap to 1 to 1.2 millimeters, and you can inspect that by looking into the gap and holding the brake. Notice now we've adjusted the idle a tiny bit, the engine is not cutting out when we apply full brakes. But you can see we have a bit more power and speed now, not a lot at this stage because it's still really rich, but we'll do this at around 3/4 to full throttle for another 2 tanks or so before we start leaning it out. And again, the one thing I kept on finding myself doing was giving it a little bit of throttle just so it fires up. Now for the fun part. We can start leaning it out and see what this KE25 SP engine really has. So fire it up. Drive it around a few times slowly to get it up to temperatures. Then a few times on full throttle, and then make your first adjustment. Only ever to the high speed needle. I won't even touch the low speed needle for now, or probably for a very long time. Then bring it in and lean out the high speed needle by around 1/8 of a turn. So that's 1/8. Now it's also better if you can do the tuning on a nice flat open surface, because it will be much easier to notice the slight improvements in engine performance as you lean it out. That's 2/8-ish. and you can start to see it's really picking up. And again there you can start to see it picking up some torque and some speed. And actually we ended up turning the high speed needle one full turn, which we found was perfect. We didn't get it to the point of being overly lean, and I'm pretty sure there was still some more in the engine, but one turn seemed a good safe amount. Still on the rich side and still getting good temperatures, and there was more than enough power in the engine. And straight away I can see that this is shaping up to be a really good engine. As you will see in the coming action videos, this truck is a real beast and may very well become one of our favourites. But that's it for this video. As we run this engine in, it's just going to get smoother and smoother, giving us better performance and more responsiveness. However, it's already practically giving us wheelies, which is always great to see. But we are going to absolutely trash this truck now and see how it does. And in the next episode, we will be showing you our full bash session and taking a look at the performance of the Kyosho NEO ST 3.0 in action. So do watch out for that, because it's going to be very good. But that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing the NEO ST 3.0 firing up for the first time, which I have to say was really easy. As with the buggy version, it was flawless, and one of the first reviews I'm going to give this is that the engine is amazing. It's not as big as our HPI F4.6, but it definitely has some torque with this gearing setup. But that's it. Please rate, comment and do subscribe for more videos. Thank you for watching and see you soon.